Jared has done so many things in his life, I think I'll let him tell you whichever pieces of that he'd like to, or maybe he'll just tell a story.
Well, we're in a line of teachers here, so I did teaching in my early life and in my later life as well. And I taught at Oakland School for the Arts for a while, which has a large African American population. And one of my kids African American kids came in wearing my Scotch plaid. And I thought, you know, that is pretty incongruous. And as McLean, I'm really very jealous of my tartan. But I figured out from the process that I was probably doing the same sort of thing by wearing the African panya in a way that was not particularly congruent with how the Cameroonians did so. But a panya was a garment, a very useful garment of African Cameroonian style. The women would wear it wrapped around in a very modest way as such, so that it had a nice little fold here on the side and covered up most of everything. And the men would wear it wrapped around like so, with a rolled up here with a little pouch for the pocket where you could carry all your money and your various gear. And the children, I'm a little too big for doing that, would wear it wrapped around like this and tied around behind. And you could also use it for a tablecloth or a bedspread or a sheet for the bed or curtains for the window or something to wipe yourself with in various ways. And that was the pure African Cameroonian panya as its way of being purely Cameroonian. So I could not be jealous of my tartan when I was wearing the other ones as well. I came as a teacher. I was one of those Peace Corps idealists of the 1960s, and the group that we went with expressed this in so many different ways, and we went to change the world, but found out how much we were changed by the experience. I don't know how many of you have lived in other parts of the world and get an idea of our way is not always the only way or even the best way. But we get kind of stuck in it until we're shown that there may be another way to view the world. Here it's traditional to bring an apple for the teacher on the first day of school. In my classroom in Yabasi, in Cameroon, there were, first day of school, 2 boys came carrying a whole stalk of bananas over their shoulders, putting it at my desk for the teacher, pour professeur. I was so excited about this. I love bananas all my life, and I was thinking all the ways I could use these bananas, slice them with mangoes, just peel them and eat them, or boil them in coconut milk, or just take the skins and rub it on your skin to like a lotion. There were just, bananas were just something wonderful for me. And my whole stock of bananas, over 100 bananas, got all ripe at once.
Oh, wow.
Here's a lesson in generosity. Learn to share what is given to you. Cameroon, such a time, such an experience. I was on a Peace Corps salary, so we had to do the best we could to get what we wanted done. And I loved to travel, and I wanted to go and visit some of the other outposts where my Peace Corps friends were also teaching. And to get there, you had to get on what we called a mammy wagon. It was like a big bread truck. And in the back of the thing, they had 3 benches parallel to the road, and you sat with your back to the wall or down the center, along with all the other travelers and their children and their groceries, their pigs and their chickens and their goats. And it was very crowded in this bus. We were almost hip bone to hip bone. And you started at the car park at like 3 in the morning, and you'd get to the river by 5, and the ferry boat didn't open till 6. And along the road, there were people who would wave to stop and get on the bus. Well, it was so full that there wouldn't be room for anyone else, but the driver would slam on the brakes, and we were all scooched forward by the thing, and there was always room for one more. We get to the Sanaga River, and it's got a high bank on the Yaoundé side, where they've cut just one lane of road so that the cars and the trucks and the travelers could get down to where the river level where the boat was. And the ferry opened at 6 in the morning and closed at 6 at night. It didn't matter which side of the river it was on, it was time to shut down, and they stopped. And sometimes when you got there, the ferry boat was on the far side of the river, and it had to pick up the passengers there and bring them here. But we had this narrow one lane with all the vehicles piled up behind it, and there was a priority. First came the government vehicles, could get on there first, and then the private cars, and then the buses like what I was on, and then the trucks. And after that, then it was the cattle, and that were being herded from the north down to down to the market. So because they could not be raised in the tropical rainforest, but up in the savannah where there were not the tsetse fly to influence them. So I found out all about the way we traveled there, but when you got to the Bach and it came across the river toward us, and there was no place for us to get off, there was a great palaver, a great discussion about how we could do this, and nobody would back up because there were 100 vehicles behind us here, and no one was willing to give up their place in line. And so after an hour's worth of haggling, the ferry boat would take the people on it back across and let them off there, and then come back empty and bring the next truck so there would be enough room for it to go. And this was just a continual mystery to me, is how they could operate a transportation system in a country like this. So I took along books from my Peace Corps locker, and in that first year I read 200 books while I was waiting for such things to happen. On the way back from visiting my friends up in Boquito, I had to cross the ferry again. And this time when I got to the river, the ferry had broken down. Actually, it didn't break down. The cable that went across the river that it guided itself on had come off its housing. We were on the far side of the river, and there was no way to get across. They said, "Oh, Professor, you can just stay here. This is fine. It'll be done in a very short time." And I waited all day, and nothing seemed to happen. And I found out by asking questions that you had to go all the way up to Bafoussam, all the way down to Douala, the port city, and all the way back around to Yaoundé, and then up to where the Bach was, in order to get it fixed and get the part and get back all the way around the route. And it took it 2 or 3 days to do that, at least. This is where I found my new friend, Felix Ali. He was a fellow traveler. And he said, "Oh, Professor, don't worry. These are my cousins that live along the bank here. We will have a place to eat and a place to stay with them." And so he shepherded me around, and we dipped our hand in the common bowl of the couscous and sauce and ate with the folks there. And we were even provided a room with my own single bed to stay in there. And it was wonderful hospitality. And I was there for 5 days and 5 nights, during which time the enterprising men who had been stranded like we were along the side of the river felled one of those big trees. They were like a redwood, but they're the African kind of trees I don't have the name for in English. But they just used machetes, and a team of them, 20 or so men, felled this large tree, took their machetes, and over 3 days they carved out a pirogue, a dugout canoe. And the women saved the chips that they had chipped off of that to make a fire, to roast the chicken that they had sacrificed and smeared the blood as christening this boat to launch it onto the river. I thought, aha, I can at least get back to my schooling, my teaching, because up till then I had never missed a day of school in my life. Can you imagine that? And here I was teaching, and I was only to be gone the weekend and had to be back at Yabasi for teaching. Missing a day. Missing 2 days, missing 3 days, and they finished this pirogue. I got my satchel, I said, "Okay, let's go." No way, Professor. This is way too dangerous. The river is that swollen stage at rainy season. If we lost you, we would lose the education of our children for the whole country. You cannot go with us. I could not persuade otherwise, so I waited and waited there with Felix Ali. And by the time that they had brought the piece for the housing for the ferry to run it around again, the week had nearly gone. I figured out that these were not indeed Felix Ali's cousins. He was just passing me off as a priest so that we could all get a free meal at a place to stay. But that was his way of being generous to me. And later I met him when I was in Yaoundé, and we became good friends, always telling the stories of how we had met at this time on the riverbank. Generosity. I was assigned to the Collège d'Enseignement Technique at EDEA, where they have the same river that I had tried to cross previously. Way downstream, they had a hydroelectric dam on the river to convert the bauxite that they mined in northern Cameroon, brought down by train, and turned it into aluminum, and the aluminum pots and pans that we used to cook with and eat on were alucam, aluminum. The corrugated roofs of the houses were alucam, aluminum from Cameroon. It was an important thing to have there. And I was housed, as were the school teachers, in a nice house in a neighborhood in the town, and I had a gate that opened into my courtyard, and right by the steps, the front steps going up, I had a papaya tree. Well, I loved papayas by then. That was my favorite new fruit. And I had these papayas that were starting to get bigger and bigger, and so every day as I went out to go to school, I would kind of squeeze the papayas to see how soon they would be ready. And I thought, aha, this day they'll be ready. And so when I got on my mobilette to come home, I rounded the corner and saw my house there in the distance and all the neighborhood boys sitting on my steps, and they were smiling and laughing and eating my papayas and spitting the seeds everywhere. They were so amazed that I was angry about that. They could not understand why. I just shooed them out the door. Why are you eating my papayas? One of my colleague teachers the next day explained to me, this is the talk of the town, not about the unrepentant neighborhood boys, but about the professor who is so stingy he won't let anyone eat his papayas, as if they were his papayas. And my professor friend explained, did you plant this papaya tree? Did you cause it to grow? Did you give it sunlight? Did you give it rain? Here in Cameroon, these are for everyone to share. My lesson was when the neighborhood boys would walk by after that, they would look up at me and they would go, I'm walking on Professor's street. I'm breathing Professor's air. So I hope that we can understand where our blessings are coming from and how we share them.